What's up, guys? This is Chase coming to you from my kitchen. I just got back from Dallas and wanted to give you guys a lowdown of just some of the costs and what kind of army builds are good. Um, the cool thing about the game is you can make it towards a quicker game. It runs about an hour, and that's usually the basic 75-point armies that we kind of gave in the board game, but also definitely work with the tabletop version. The Most of the 75-point armies are a little bit faster to play with, but also are definitely a lot smaller of armies, making it to where you can kind of customize those 75 points pretty easily. But the cool thing is whenever you really want to have these massive battles, you can just add points. Just make sure you guys have the equal value of points. And that's also where the customizing of the armies comes in a lot, where you have a little bit bigger battles. You can have a lot more units, customize your armies as you see fit, and go from there. The big thing is it's still a skirmish game, so it's not full-scale war where you just have thousands of units. It's not Warhammer by any means. It's a game of skirmishes, so you're taking these mini battles and playing it out on the tabletop. So just want to bring you guys some lists that I really enjoy myself. I noticed that online, some people had taken some of the points and stuff like that from my older videos and posted them to kind of give you guys a breakdown. They are very close to the actual numbers, but those were before a lot more play testing had occurred. So definitely the numbers are a little bit skewed in comparison to what is online. So just want to talk to you guys a little bit about each team, and then what I usually build out of that team. My brother will also be building and writing up some of his lists that he really enjoys playing, and we'll post that in the next few days. But tonight I wanted to show you guys just some of my favorite builds from each team and just talk about the teams a little bit. So the first team we're going to talk about is the Ancients. The Ancients are a super fun team to play just because they do so much. They're so powerful. The Ancients have the ability to just move tides through and knock people off rocks, or blast their way through whatever, control creatures. The lurkers on the board, there's characters that can control them. One of the main guys, he can actually control enemy units if he rolls the right amount of dice, and those are super fun guys to play with. They're really expensive when it comes to point costs. So a lot of people that play those really like those controlling characters. I personally, and you'll see through all my lists, what I really enjoy playing more than anything. By the way, if you hear my kids, I apologize. They're a little loud, but you might hear that a couple times in this video. So the things I enjoy playing are mass armies. Well, mass as you can get in a skirmish game. So you'll see from my list that it kind of shows these kind of things. So one of my favorite builds for the Ancients, I have two that I'm going to talk to you guys about. My first being the Awakener, who is the smallest character, and I'm going to try to pop up a little bit of a picture here on the video of each of these characters. So the Awakener is one of my favorite characters. He's also the smallest of all these Ancients. These Ancients are kind of godlike creatures that have lived in the lurk for millennia and that were worshipped by the Nautilus and the Low Clans for so long. But anyway, he's the smallest one, but he's the most fun to me because the idea that he brings to the table is the Aetherlings. These Aetherlings are really minion characters that they kind of create and come out of the ether, and they're these ether spirits. But they're super weak, but if you have a whole lot of them, it's a whole lot of dice. So if you play games like X-Wing or things like that where you just do mass tie swarms or anything like that, it's kind of a swarm army. So the Awakener plus Aetherlings. The Awakener himself has, of course, the Awaken, which allows him to pull Aetherlings out of the ether, costs 4 ether. So everything you kind of do in this game costs ether, and ether is this kind of currency that kind of goes on during the game, and you can kind of gather it as you go, but you also start with a little pool, and every single action you do with that character, if it's a special action besides attacking and defending, you have to spend this ether so that he can awaken these creatures, these Aetherlings. He can also do Reckoning, which adds more dice to his attack roll, which also makes him a lot more powerful. But then also he has what's called the Bond, and the Bond is what's so awesome about the Awakener. He can spend 1 ether, and before he takes an attack, he can first attack with all of his etherlings. So, all of his etherlings within 1 fathom of himself. So, in the tabletop version, how we measure distances is in fathoms. One of my other favorite builds from the Ancients is Mass Lurk Giants. So, thank goodness this last campaign we unlocked the Lurk Giants because they are hilarious and huge. So the whole idea with a Lurk Giant is one of our biggest miniatures we have, but they move through enemy units for free. They can move straight through them as pretty much they're crushing their way past everybody, and whenever they do make their path movement, all those characters have to take a damage and move out of the way. So that's not even attacking, that's just moving. So with the Lurk Giants, I love coming in and just taking those guys and just plowing them as fast as I can. They are not the fastest, so it is really difficult to do, so you really do have to be thinking of how you're going to do it by swimming or whatever else methods you can take. But getting those guys out there, getting them in close, their attack is really, really powerful already. Black dice are the most powerful dice to attack with in the game, and they have 3 of them. So they're definitely the most powerful when it comes to attacking, but they're not the greatest at defending themselves because they're just huge, lurking, slow creatures, and they only have a range of 1. So you really have to get in close, but once you do, it is a blast to play with these guys. So that's a little bit about the Ancients. My favorite list, of course, playing with the Ancients themselves, the Overseer, the Steward, the Warden, the Awakener, and the Inspirer. Those guys are just a blast to have on their team anyway. All of them do something special. The Overseer is kind of like the main guy that I told you that can get that Master's Clutch, that idea of controlling someone for a turn, and the Steward, he's kind of like this guy that stewards the Lurk, so he takes care of it. He can build these curative coral out of nothing to where if you go over that curative coral, then you get healed, etc. Anyway, Etheling's very, very fun, or Ancient, sorry, is a very, very fun team to play with, just for the fact that they can do so much. One of the other teams are the Low Clans. The Low Clans, to me, are one of the most fun to play with, just for the fact that they are cheaper. So you can very easily, as you've heard from me, I like to do mass swarms, so you can definitely get a lot of those cheaper units out. They actually have a few different cheaper units. They have the Anglerfin Howlers, which are really interesting to play with. They're super cheap because they're very random. They can be really, really good, but they can also be very, very bad because before you attack, you have to roll one of the red die, and depending on what you roll will depend on how strong they are during that attack. So they could come in swinging hardcore, but then they could also come in and completely whiff, every single time. Just depends on the turn and your rolls. But they also have Scuttlebrute Hoarders, which are a little bit of a smaller unit. They're interesting because they can do what's called rummage. So in the game, whenever you're scouring the lurk, trying to defeat each other, you're also kind of scouring and looking around for really cool loot that you can use in your attacks. So they do a thing called rummage, where they can actually search twice in one turn. So instead of the normal thing for most characters, they can kind of search and just see what's around once. They can do it twice by spending some money. The army I like to build out of the Low Clans, though, is a what's called a Carapace army. So there are 3 types of Carapace that we have in the game. The Carapace are the crab-like creatures. We have Cinephus Vor, who's one of the crab leaders, and then we also have Aranax. And Aranax Coalfight is just, again, one of the Low Clan heroes, but the thing I like to build out of these guys is a Carapace army. So what I usually take is Cinephus, and then I also take a whole bunch of Carapace Bolters, which are their basic unit. The thing I like about this team is it's very cheap, but it's also very firepower heavy. So the cool thing about the Carapace is they have these kind of like cannon launcher things kind of built out of their arms. So Cinephus Vor has a thing called Fire Alley, where in a line of 3 fathoms, he can take out and actually target every single model within that template that we'll be providing for you guys. And that is so powerful. He's not the best at attack, but I mean when you're being able to attack so many units at once, it really comes in really handy. Then the biggest thing is those Carapace Bolters. They are cheaper units, but they also have a thing called Salvo. So on top of just being able to roll a bunch of dice, which really helps, you can spend 3 ether, and whenever you shoot with those Carapace Bolters, anytime you roll a skull, it actually counts as 2. So it really helps getting more hits out there on the board and from a distance. So that's what I like to play as with the low clans. There's all kinds of really fun stuff with the low clans. Grim, for instance, who is kind of like the leader of the low clans now. He has some really cool things. So in the game you have these activation cards, and these activation cards you move one of these tokens from one to the other of moving, attacking, and then ending your turn. Cool thing about Grim is he can completely take out one of those rows of activation, so you can't even use it on your turn. So it's really difficult for you to take him over because he's just cutting off your rations is the whole idea. So he's a really fun guy to play with. Korak is fun. He just is very like a dirty fighter, throwing sand in people's eyes, disarming people and taking their loot from them, which is really cool. Of course, a lot of people have seen Urf the Swollen one of my favorite art pieces, but also just he's a fun character. He has a thing called Bloodthirst, so if he ever rolls 2 skulls in a turn, he can attack again. So he can be very powerful. He's a little bit more expensive for a low clans player. Low clans heroes are cheaper anyway, but Urf is a little bit more expensive and a large model also. But either way, there's a lot of really fun guys to play with on the low clans team. But I want to talk a little bit now about the last two guys, the last two factions. One being the Cog and the Nautilus. So with the Cog, again, I really like to do mass armies pretty much for every single thing, except for the Nautilus. I actually play Nautilus a little bit differently. But anyway, for the Cog, what I like to do is play to their automatons. Their automatons are these little clockwork creatures that they kind of do their bidding for the Cog, and that's actually one of my favorite armies to play as. So sorry again for my kids screaming in the background a little bit, but so with the Cog I like to play Theodore P. Stevedore, who is kind of like the leader of the Cog, but he also has some really cool buffs for teams. So he can do like a defensive aura called Barker, and Barker allows him to kind of beef up the defense of these clockwork automatons. He can beef up the defense of any character within 1 fathom of him, but the idea is we have all these clockwork riflemen that I enjoy playing with the riflemen just because of range. Every now and then I'll bring in a wrenchman just for the fact that they can get in close and do some more damage. But the riflemen, buffing them, making them a little bit harder to kill off, but then again having that range, and because it's mass, I have multiple dice that I can throw at one time to kind of get rid of a lot of units. So they're really fun to play with. I really enjoy playing with the Clockwork Rifleman and Theodore P. Stevedore. I'm going to write up all of these army lists too and kind of show you the point breakdown a little bit and some starting stuff I like to start with. So another cool thing about this is besides the actual army units you can choose, you also get starter cards and starter loot. So this starter loot allows you to kind of go in and beef up your characters before they actually hit the board. The bad thing about them, I mean, they do cost points, so you're kind of limiting the amount of units you get. Plus, again, you can find loot on the board as you play the game, but it can really help your characters. So just a real quick instance of some of the starter cards for the Cog. There's things like the Drill, where whenever you roll ether, you actually receive more ether. You can have the shiny new rivets added to your character's armor, and it adds defense. You can get the Invigorator, which is like an energy drink, is what we kind of show on the artwork, but it upgrades all of your attack dice. So it's a little more expensive of a card, but it's really powerful, and it's just really fun to put on your characters. So just want to talk to you a little bit about the starter cards that you can kind of also add to your army. So whenever you're making bigger armies it's actually probably even more beneficial to add those starter cards rather than the smaller armies. The smaller armies, I like to have more units, but some people like to have a few units, but they're super beefed up. So it just depends on your play style, what you like. But that's what I do anyway. So last team, the last faction is the Nautilus, and I have so many people that love this team just because they all can do so much, and they're really just, you can tell they are they're really good at working together. A lot of buffs that really help their own team and things of that nature. Personally, I usually like to do mass armies, but with the Nautilus, I don't. With the Nautilus, I really like to find the characters that work together really, really well, but also just really jack with other people, because that is the most fun thing to do in this game, is just mess with your opponent. Even if you lose, just messing with your opponent the whole time and getting in their heads is really, really fun. And the Nautilus is one of my favorite teams to do that with because they have so many opportunities to do it. So my favorite team to build from the Nautilus is Brighton, the Bare Knuckle, Jules, the Lightbringer, and Eleanor. What's Eleanor's last? Eleanor Lash. That's what her last name is. Eleanor Eudora Lash. So the cool thing about Eleanor is she has this thing called Adrenaline Musk, and she places the Adrenaline Musk token and actually kind of boosts and upgrades, the weakest attack die for everyone within 1 fathom of Eleanor. So she puts out this musk and actually helps everyone fight better and stronger. Kind of just, it's a really, really fun thing to play with. She also has Femme Fatale. So that's one of my favorite things from her. She is able to actually target rival and degrade their weakest defense dice because of her looks. It's just a fun kind of thing to play with her. And some other characters I like to play with are Jules, of course. Jules, the Lightbringer, is kind of like the healer of the group, so that really makes it really fun. But he also has a thing called Flash, so he's able to degrade defense die from other characters because he kind of puts off this emitting light, kind of blinds them a little bit in a way, and just makes them weaker against attacks. So it makes it kind of fun to play with him and just mess with your opponents in that way. But he's also a friend to all. And this is what I love about Jules, is he can go out into the lurk as fast as he can. He can search all these lurker tiles, and he will not get attacked as long as he doesn't attack those lurkers. So where most characters, they go out, they find these lurkers, and then they get attacked by them because they're kind of disturbing them. Jules is a friend to all of those creatures, so he can kind of go out, disturb them, and then kind of allow them to just go wreak havoc on the other team if he likes to try to do that. It's a fun character to play. Last but not least, on that team that I like to place in the Nautilus is Brighton the Bare Knuckle. Really, he's the tank of the Nautilus, and with all this weakening of all this defense dice from Eudora and Jules, you have Brighton come in there and just clean up shop. He can attack multiple characters. He can use a thing called Razor Fin Punch, where he actually adds more dice to his attack. His attack's already 2 black dice, which is the strongest of most characters in the entire game. And when he uses Razor Fin Punch, he can actually add a red to that, so he gets just that much more opportunity to just lay waste to characters. And then, of course, he's got Give Order, which during his turn he can give a friendly model an extra movement ability. So if you're trying to get away somewhere, or you're using Jules, for instance, to go get all those lurkers, you can kind of get Jules out there. Then you can also give him orders and kind of move him along even faster and continue to get all these lurkers out in the field, which is just a fun way just to screw with your opponents. So that's what I love about the Nautilus. They just have a team that really works well together, and I really enjoy it, where some teams like the COG have just hardcore attack units and some defense, but really hardcore attack units. The Nautilus have a little bit more defense, and they're just kind of fun to play with. Sorry about that. My kids are taking a bath, so they're getting a little rowdy. Anyway, those are my fun lists that I enjoy playing with the most. I know my brother has very different lists. He usually doesn't go mass. He goes build up buff troops, comes in there, tries to wipe out all of the stuff that I have. I mean, in turns, he might take out 2 or 3 units of mine, where I might weaken one of his. But it's just a fun game. Continue looking for more stuff. We're going to be putting these lists on the Kickstarter to kind of show off some ideas. We'll put some sample cards out there so you guys can get some ideas of just a couple of the characters from each team. And yeah, if you guys want to provide any thoughts that you have or any kind of lists you'd like to see, definitely put those in the comments and we will try to make it happen. Thanks, guys.